Okay, here we go with period 8.4, topic 8.4, the economy after 1945. And a quick summary of this is the economy was booming and good. Post-war prosperity was on the rise. The middle class and the upper class were growing. And if you were to ask me what decade would I like to live in modern U.S. history, the post-war 1945 to 1955 would probably be it. And yes, we had our troubles. We'll talk about that a little bit. But for a lot of the nation, things were going well. And even for minority groups like African Americans, although things weren't going well right away, we're seeing the dawn of the civil rights movement. And we're starting to see government action to solve some of those civil rights issues. But that's something we'll get to later. I think this is an awesome decade. There's not a ton of super critical information with it in terms of like the AP exam or something, but this is it's an interesting period. It's a good time period, and I've seen a lot of these things questioned as in the multiple choice section of the AP exam. Um, but like I said, it's a good section. Let's get into it. Try to keep it under 10 minutes. Ready, set, go. Okay, learning objective number one. We actually have two in this one. So again, this is 8.4, economy after 1945. In your textbook, it's 26A, 26C, a little bit of 26B as well. But we are trying to explain the causes of economic growth in the years after World War II. So in other words, why did we boom after a war? That was my guiding question. How did a war lead to prosperity? Because you'd kind of think that a war would actually do the opposite, that things would be tough. But remember, we were in the Great Depression right before the war began, and it was the war that got us out of it. That was something we learned back when we were studying the Great Depression in period number 7. So, what happened that led us to be so prosperous? Well, number one, the war didn't happen in our nation. The major economies of the world, European economies, Germany, Great Britain, places like that, they are crumbled, they're destroyed physically and not physically, just in terms of their banking system and stuff, their financial system. The Far East, Japan, China, they're destroyed. The Soviet Union, they've lost millions and millions and millions and millions of people. They lost more people during the war than anybody, some through enemy attack and some through their own doing. But we are the only country that's largely our homeland is largely untouched, and we didn't lose a ton during the war. We did have a significant impact, and we lost a large number of men and women. There's no doubt about that. But in comparison to the rest, we're doing pretty well, and so that helped us out. Also, after 1945, this is a good key term to remember. This military-industrial complex. Dwight Eisenhower coined that term, but the economy is now there's a large section of our economy that is focused on defense. And after World War II, we go right into the Cold War, and so there's this whole new sector of jobs and just the economy that's focused on building things for war and securing our defense systems for this what is going to be a drawn out Cold War. And so that system provides jobs. It leads to the money being made by individuals, investments being made. This is a huge part of our economy at the time. If you, let's see, I think if I jump in here, we got discussion of the Bretton Woods system. Make sure you know that the World Bank, the IMF come around during this time. If you've been paying attention to the COVID outbreak, those things have been mentioned. But here, military-industrial complex. I mean, this is a key idea that provides so many jobs and services, and we continue to make planes, and technology continues to progress because of that. And so that's a big one. Also, the government has, starting with the Great Depression, the government has exercised tons of control over the economy, and so they are willing to spend to stimulate the economy. They are willing to regulate things, and they're more accepting of unions. They're more accepting of wage raises. We're far away from the laissez-faire economy of prior to the Depression. The government's exerting a lot of control, and so that is also leading to more money in the hands of people. In terms of technology, we also see a boom there. I've got two examples. IBM, after the war was over, they continued to work and produce just things to fuel the military-industrial complex and things that would eventually lead to the computer, that personal computers that we use today. Obviously, those are a big deal, and so that connection to the war I mean, is super cool when you stretch it out across time. But the war led to the need for these things, and that company and that sector of technology continues to grow after the war. I also use the example of Lockheed Martin. I think they were just called Lockheed Company then. Now they're Lockheed Martin, but that was a company that produces mainly airplanes. And so they built airplanes during the war, and when the war's over, they continue to build airplanes. Some of those become big time passenger planes that are used in the airline industry. They continue to make military planes, but they affect the more not military specific, the general economy later on. And so that's a key part to that prosperity as well. And then lastly, you guys probably know this term. I think boomer is a popular slang term used nowadays, and we have this thing called the baby boom. So all these people who many of which are still alive today, who were born in the post-war economic boom. People were having a lot of kids. War was over, life was good, and so many people had children, and that led to this generation called the baby boomers. I'd have to look at the exact dates, but that's babies born in the years I think 1945-ish to 1960-ish. So those are the reasons why we are prosperous after the war. Again, the war really is good for us. Lots of other places, no, but for us, it led to an economic boom. So scrolling down here a little bit, how did the war change the opportunities people had? If I was to go back to your book, did I mention this? Let's see. No, that's there. I'll have to go back for that. So go back to your book. Maybe it was in this section. Hold on. Yep, there it is. So we become a nation of consumers, as your book says. We've already kind of become that, but that increases as consumer goods become more widely available. People have more money, the middle class grows, and so people are spending on all sorts of stuff, gadgets and appliances and things like that. But one thing that is more important than that is the GI Bill. The GI Bill is still around, but this was put into place so that people returning from war, soldiers returning from war, could go to college on the government's dime. And so that changes the workforce. If you go to Khan Academy, they've got a big explanation of the GI Bill. That's the main focus of here. And so veterans are able to go to college. They're able to get unemployment benefits. It really boosted this large part of the population that had given themselves, in some cases voluntarily or in some cases drafted, into the war effort. And that was a big boost to the economy. I like this sentence here. Where is it? I don't see it, but somewhere in your book it says something to the extent of the group of people the veterans who had become part of the workforce were the most educated workforce of all time, because many of them were taking on blue collar type jobs that normally wouldn't have a college education, but now they they did have a college education. So good picture there of a crowded hall. If you guys know anything about Southern Illinois University, right across town from us, they had a huge boom in the post-war years, and that's where a lot of the buildings on campus were put up to house the GI Bill attendees. And so let's see here. We got the GI Bill suburbs. So the war opened up this land of suburbia. There's a good section in your book on that. A Suburban Nation, 26C. You guys should have read that already. You guys will read about movement to the Sun Belt and the difference between urban areas and suburban areas. There's a lot of good things with this because it provides new housing, new space, but there's also some bad stuff as gentrification happens, as the tax base of inner cities leaves and goes to the suburbs, which is something we'll talk about later on. This is a mixed bag because it provides housing opportunity for people, but it also has a negative effects, especially on inner city areas. In terms of new opportunities, a lot of people got them, but the lower class was still the lower class. There's a book written, I believe, in the 60s, the late 50s. It was titled "The Other America," and that examined this idea that we see a rise in the upper class and middle class of people, but the people who were poor before the war and during the war remain that way after. There's not a huge boost to the lower class at this time, and that's for various reasons. You guys can look into that, but that's that's another thing that we have to understand, that as we look at movement of people, migration, getting of jobs, that sort of thing, there is still a group of people who don't really benefit. And we'll talk more about minority groups and women later on as we get specific to in a topic specific to those groups of people. But in terms of economic class, the poor were still poor. And then it's also big to note that there was a migration trend going on, and that was a lot of people were moving south and west. It's kind of like the opposite of the Great Migration, in that people are going back to the south. But we're largely talking about places like Texas and California and the southwest. Those states see big booms during this time. California grows immensely during this time. Really, California was not one of the larger states for many years, and then in the post-war era, it grows exponentially, and now it's our most populous state. And so that change happened as a result of the war. So that is period 8.4. Again, this is a supplement to your reading and your Khan Academy work. Make sure you're going through, reading through Khan Academy, reading through your textbook. There's a lot of good material there. And then, again, use this video as kind of an outline or a supplement to what you're already doing. So we'll get to 8.5 next. There you have it.